we're going to study the Renaissance today. And I think it's one of the most beautiful, wonderful times. And man, so this is a very long presentation. I'm not going to go through every line and every word. It's available for you on Blackboard. Download it. You can study any parts that I miss or don't cover fully. The Renaissance means rebirth. But the medieval people are really pissed off about that, because if the Renaissance is rebirth, then medieval is dead. They don't like that. But they missed the whole thing by a mile. It's not the rebirth of civilization. It's the rebirth of interest in classical texts. You know, because you think about civilization, and it takes these ebbs and flows, right? Peaks and valleys. So I think it was up, 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 and then Rome came. The Greek, you know, up, 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 and then Rome, up, 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 and then Rome fell. And civilization, you know, talking about culture and learning and knowledge and education, all that coming down, arts. And that's what's called the Middle Ages, the medieval times, you know. Doesn't mean it's dead, it just means that when the Renaissance happened, and the Renaissance started in Italy, it's the Italian Renaissance. Way back in 1300s, much earlier than the English Renaissance. And in Italy, they sort of rediscovered the knowledge of the ancients, meaning Rome and Greek. And I want to tell you one quick story. Alexandria is in Egypt. And Cleopatra was hooking up with Mark Antony, Roman general, and Augustus Caesar didn't like what was going on, and they had a war. Well, in Alexandria, there was a library, the Library of Alexandria, and they boasted that they had a copy of every scroll and every manuscript ever written in the history of humanity. It may have been. It was an extensive library. And in that library, they had prototypes and plans for all kinds of technology that we didn't rediscover for like 1,000 years after that. One of those things was a steam engine. You know, this is with Pythagoras and all his stuff. There was more learning. Well, in the war that ensued, that library burned to the ground. All of that knowledge was erased. And historians and scholars today, they say that that library's burning set us back 1,000 years in civilization. One library. Just from that context, this idea of rediscovering those old texts is a valid one, you know? It's like all of a sudden, okay, and here comes this new idea of humanism. And humanism is sort of a philosophy, but it's also sort of a code to live by. And it goes like this: live a rich, happy, virtuous, fulfilling life. And be good to other people while you do it. It sounds great. It sounds like just common sense, you know? But no, it's a whole movement, the humanist movement. And the goal of life is to attain virtue, not success, not money, not fame. And the idea is that only if you're virtuous can you truly experience happiness. Now, we were talking about America, and that's kind of, I mean, I don't know that we have that same philosophy today, but it sure is refreshing to read it here in the Renaissance. And really, the whole Renaissance was based on that, this idea of humanism and the idea of looking at things from different perspectives, expanding your mind, becoming more intelligent. Here we go with this character. Who is he? King Henry VIII. Yeah. And it is hard to overestimate how much of an effect this one man had on all of history, because it goes like this. The Renaissance was a time when the middle class started growing, when people became more literate, when books were promulgating their way across Europe, you know, where people were gradually more and more educated at all classes, when the economy was just booming, going crazy. But there was all this underpinning, this deep well of problems that were occurring. And it went like this. Before the Renaissance, there was this war, and it was a war between noble families in England called the War of the Roses. And it went on forever and a day. But finally, when it had already bankrupted everybody and everybody was just war weary and no one was just kind of a stalemate, well, that's when King Henry VIII's father saw his opening. He was able to marry into the enemy's family, basically, and consolidate their power that way. And that started the Tudor Dynasty. Okay, great. Well, up until, we know about the religions of Britain. It was pagan, and then it was Christian, right? And then when it was Christian, it was never anything but Catholic. And it was the state religion. It's not like you had a choice. Like, I think I'll be a Muslim. No, it's the state religion. And in fact, it wasn't too long before the Spanish Inquisition came along, and that was like they would come and torture you, try to make you admit that you're not Christian, not Catholic. Yeah, Spanish Inquisition was bad business. But anyway, so we have the Tudor Dynasty beginning right here. Great. Well, they have 2 sons, 2 daughters. Wonderful. So the heir to the throne is Arthur. Arthur. Great name, right? Wonder where he got that. So Henry never thought he would be the king. It says whatever. So his brother was the heir and he was the spare, right? Yeah, great. So Arthur married a Spanish princess named Catherine of Aragon. And they did that a lot. You had to consolidate power between nations, and it was an important thing. So he married her, but it wasn't too long until he up and died on her of an ailment. I don't know, it's just a sickness of some kind. He died on her, died young. So now that leaves everything in a lurch. Okay, Henry's going to be the king. For whatever reason, Henry had taken a liking to Catherine of Aragon. Maybe it was political, maybe it was otherwise, I don't know. But then, because she's a widow, then he marries her. King Henry VIII marries Catherine of Aragon, the Spanish princess. Great, wonderful. So they're married for 24 years. Sometime within those years, Catherine gives birth to their only child, Mary. Well, Catherine cannot produce a male heir for some reason, which is very important for them. And so Henry also falls like kind of disenchanted with her, and there's this hot new young little thing running around the castle named Anne Boleyn. And she, by all accounts, was just a seductress, just one of those people that walks into the room and owns it. She could manipulate men like it was playing a violin. And so King Henry took a liking to Anne Boleyn. Well, time to get a divorce. Oh, wait, I can't get a divorce because I'm Catholic. I've got an idea. There was a Catholic law that said you cannot marry anyone who your brother has slept with, had sex with. Okay. I guess, okay, whatever. So he thought, oh, I got it. Catherine had been married to Arthur, so I'll ask for an annulment. So he goes to the Pope and says, Pope, hook me up, brother. Well, first of all, they don't do that. But second of all, the Pope was a Spanish Pope, and Catherine's a Spanish princess. The Pope said no. So he can't get a divorce. He can't get an annulment after 24 years. It's comical to even think about. So he does something that has just changed history like nothing else. He broke with the Catholic Church. He proclaimed to the citizens of England that they no longer had to adhere to any of the edicts or rules of the Catholic Church. He started his own church called the Church of England and proclaimed himself the head of it and granted himself a divorce. Oh boy. Okay. So now the Pope excommunicated Henry and put in what's called a the name escapes me, but an edict, a law, a ruling, a calling from the Pope to all Christians to overthrow Henry. Oh gosh, okay. Well, so imagine the hubris of this man, because I want a male heir and I want a new wife. Everyone in the nation has to change their religion. Can you imagine that? No choice. You had to move to the Church of England, which was Protestant. Okay, so now we move to Protestant. That's all fine and good. He marries Anne Boleyn, and somewhere in that marriage they have Elizabeth. Well, yeah, you know, one thing led to another, and the king, she couldn't give him a male heir, and he started seeing some other cute young things running around the castle and thought maybe, yeah, you know, so King Henry accused Anne Boleyn of having sex with her own brother, which she didn't, and chopped off her head. So it goes like this. Divorced, beheaded, survived. I'm sorry. Divorced, beheaded, died. Divorced, beheaded, survived. So those are his 5 wives, and 6 wives, I'm sorry. And divorced, beheaded, died. Divorced, beheaded, survived. He's got a long track record. So he put Anne Boleyn to death, and then he married Jane Seymour, and from Jane Seymour he had young Edward here. Okay, great. When King Henry died, then guess who got to be king? This kid. He was 7 when he died, when King Henry died. This kid did. And so he had the region councils and people who kind of were going to hold the reins until he became of age. But he was Protestant. He was keeping the Protestant faith. And then he goes up and he dies on us. Young guy, just dies. People died back then. And so that made Mary the Queen of England. And Mary was a devout Catholic. So she decided to change everyone back to Catholicism. So we were Catholic, then we were Protestant, now we're Catholic again. And Mary was so intense about it that she started burning Protestants at the stake just for being Protestant. No, not hanging or chopping off the old head, burning alive for being a different religion. Okay, she burned over 300 Protestants. And I just feel for those poor people, like about to be burned alive at the stake. For what? For being a different, it's hard to even believe. So, but it happened. Now, Queen Mary became known as Bloody Mary because of that. All right, so she couldn't have any male heirs either, and then she died. Guess who gets to be queen now? Elizabeth. So Elizabeth is different. She's cunning. She brings Protestantism back, but she changes and structures the Church of England to be kind of a hybrid between Catholicism and Protestantism. She kept the crucifix as a symbol, where Catholics, they have a crucifix, Protestants just have a cross. She kept the crucifix. She kept the sort of ambiance of the cathedral, the stained glass, and the swinging of the incense and all that. She kept a lot of things so that no one was completely dissatisfied, but no one was completely happy either. And so in that way, she was able to kind of quell some of that. But as we talked about before, this religious ping pong war and this battle went on, and it just, even today in Ireland, there's problems, Catholic versus Protestantism. Okay, now look at this wonderful family tree I found for you here. Notice this person right here. This person is Henry VIII's sister. She had a child, James Stuart. And they had a daughter named Mary Stuart. And she is the person who would become Mary, Queen of Scots. She, after all the other Tudors had died, she had a very strong claim to the English throne. Some may have said that it was even stronger than Elizabeth's. And all that has to do with Catholic versus Protestantism too, right? They would say the marriage with Catherine of Aragon was sanctioned by God and therefore valid. Any of this other Anne Boleyn or any of that, none of that even counts, because he was excommunicated, and that just, so they say Mary Queen of Scots, just the rightful queen. Those are the Catholics. So you see how this is working out? So Mary Queen of Scots ruled in Scotland for a long time, over a decade, I think maybe almost close to 20 years. And then there was a rebellion. Mary expected Elizabeth to come to her aid, but Elizabeth did not. And so Mary lost her throne. And she was going to have a triumphant return, but she dipped over into England a little too long. Elizabeth got her and imprisoned her. Okay, so for the next, probably 20 years, Mary, Queen of Scots, was imprisoned in England. And when I say imprisoned, like kept in castles, Well, so all that time, there were so many plots against Elizabeth. And all that time, Elizabeth dealt with it, okay? Until finally, just irrefutable evidence surfaced, and Elizabeth chopped off Mary, Queen of Scots' head. Yeah. And so, but Mary, Queen of Scots, had a son, James. Elizabeth was, she called herself the Virgin Queen. And what it means is, as soon as she married anybody, she'd lose control. She would, things would be much different. And she knew she was the best ruler that anyone could be. Man, she reigned for 45 years. And they were the most prosperous, most peaceful, egalitarian kind of years that England has ever had. I think so. It's my view. This is the Renaissance. This is high Renaissance. This is when all of the stuff, for example, this is when language became, some weird things are happening on my computer. This is when language became, this is when the English language became the world's dominating language, kind of like Latin was before. Yeah, man. I mean, this is when England became this thing that would eventually turn into the English Empire and conquered the whole world, So yeah, she was a hell of a great ruler. But she knew as soon as a man came into so she worked the suitors against each other incredibly cunningly. And she remained unmarried her whole life. And she called herself the Bride of England. She's a true public servant. And so because of that, she didn't have any heirs, And because of that, Mary, Queen of Scots' son, James, became James the First. Yeah. And he was the next king. Okay, there's the British history for you in a nutshell. So you can see Edward here, he reigned from 1547 to 1553. 6 years. Elizabeth, 45 years. She was 25 when she became queen. All right, now, Henry VIII was a Renaissance man. He wrote poetry. He did all the things, He was, a Renaissance man means a humanist. It means someone who is well educated in a lot of different areas, like a jack of all trades kind of. Bloody Mary, we talked about her. Elizabeth, talked about her. Okay, I'm going to speed through these writers. Okay, this is when, of course, the printing press was really taking hold, and books were finding their way all across the world. And then the Elizabethan, I'm gonna cover this when we get to Shakespeare. So let's look at some art quickly. Okay, the Renaissance was a just wonderful artistic time. Now, like I said, the high Renaissance really started in Italy, Florence, Rome, these places, even Venice, but mainly Florence and Rome is where these artists gradually started becoming commissioned by the church to make more and more beautiful art. And a lot of it is religious subjects because that's what they had to work with, If you've never been to Florence, man, I recommend it highly. Florence is a little bit like Austin, I think. It's kind of hip and it's not super huge. It's very walkable, and you can see so much amazing art and history in Florence. This is the Medici. The Medici commissioned this from, and this is actually the father. So he put himself in it. Ha. Okay, this is in Florence as well. This is the door to a cathedral that I talked about. It was a contest for the artist who would make this door. And you guys, when you walk and look at it like really up close, it's breathtaking. It's very nice. I mean, it's about the rise and fall of man, Garden of Eden, all that stuff. But if you look at the artistry, it's really, really, really. Now you can see, you juxtapose this with medieval art. It's all the icons and the disproportionate caricatures almost. But this is more lifelike. This is more affective, meaning it sparks more emotion. Just the detail.
How big is that door? Like, is it like a small one with like really fine details, or is it like
Well,
much larger?
I'm 6'5", and I only stand. No kidding. I'm not. I'm 5'7", and I'm probably like to here on it. So it's pretty big. It's a pretty big door. It's not overly huge, but it's a pretty big door. It opens in the middle, of course, you know. Okay. Christianity has always had this problem with the idea that John the Baptist blessed Jesus. Because if Jesus is the Son of God, then how does that work? And some of these paintings are trying to overcome that disparity. So they say, what is it that John the Baptist met Jesus in the womb? Okay, and in the womb, not the same womb, like different wombs, but I don't know. And then in that place, Jesus blessed John the Baptist to say, later on in life, I'm going to meet you and you can bless me. I don't know. But a lot of this right here, what you're seeing is kind of trying to explain that. These are the three graces from Greek mythology, actually. The three graces, and they inspire artists and poets and musicians. It's pretty much what college is like right there. Every day, picnics with cherubs. Okay, and then there's this. I know I've already talked about the Sistine Chapel roof, but I think it may be the highest expression of humanity to the universe, you know, that we've had yet. And the pictures do not do it justice. I mean, it's overwhelming. It's a spiritual experience, even if you're not spiritual. It defies words. Now, if you look at it straight from the floor up, and I need to get a better, more clear image of that. But anyway, if you look from the floor up, you can see that Michelangelo has painted. Okay. Anyway, when you look straight up, you can see the architectural details that he worked into the painting. They're not there. They're not there. There's no pedestals and columns here. It's just a smooth roof. It's really amazing. It's just overwhelming. Okay, I'm going to speed through this. This is the one that I have in my living room that I meditate on every day. I just like to think about what is it? The damned cast into hell. Yeah. Soothing. Oh, if 2020 was a painting. Okay, yeah, I like to look at these guys, you know, like I especially like the demon man committing violence against women here, and this naked guy being choked to death. Yeah, that's real happy. Okay, moving on. I really do not have that painting. I'm just kidding. All right, and a lot of the subjects are Christ and the crucifixion and whatnot, but you can see the lifelike nature of these. The shading, the lighting. All right, you've seen that a million times. All right. Now this is Madonna of the Rocks. This is again trying to figure out how John the Baptist can bless Jesus. This is the Michelangelo, his David. And you can see it in the Uffizi in Florence, but you can see a life-like exact replica just out in a piazza in Florence. You just walk by it every day. I mean, it's just right there. You can go see it. He's tall. He's like, probably like 12 feet tall, the David. And I enjoyed all the museums that I have seen. The Met was the best, believe it or not, in New York. Absolutely. But at the Louvre, I enjoyed it. It was not my favorite museum, the Louvre, but there were certain parts of it I liked. But the part that I absolutely hated was where the Mona Lisa is kept. The reason is because it's this room, and it's a pretty big room, but there's nothing else in it but the Mona Lisa behind glass and all that. And that room is always packed. And so there's people in there shoving and pushing and spitting and throwing, babies on people's shoulders, and just, it is like humanity breaks down to its worst impulses, and all to see a work of art. I'm like, you guys, people are screaming and shouting, and like, you guys, that defeats the whole purpose you're here for. You can't be a jackass and get to see it and like be enlightened then, the two things don't really go together. Okay, again, this is Jesus blessing John the Baptist so he could meet him later in life. This is my favorite out of all these, except the Sistine Chapel. It's called the Ambassadors. The Ambassadors is the perfect Renaissance painting, because these are Renaissance men and they are humanists. And the philosophy of humanism and the overall philosophy of the Renaissance is all encoded into this thing. And so if you look at all the embellishments, the accoutrements in the background, you see the globes, you see the guitar. This is everything they valued in the Renaissance. Music, it's probably poetry or literature of some kind. Mathematics. This is astronomy or astrology. This is an actual map of the world. We're mapping the world. Just think about that. New places are discovered during this time. And the English did a lot of that exploring. Yeah, man.
What's that skull doing there?
Thank you. Okay, so there is this really predominant philosophy in humanism and in the Renaissance, and it goes like this: you should attempt. It's called mutability. It doesn't mean what it sounds like it means. What it means is everything is impermanent. Everything is constantly changing, and everything exists in a way that requires you to kind of chase it to understand. So you should always try to look at things from different angles. You should always try to view another perspective. And of course, the skull symbolizes carpe diem, seize a day, symbolizes, oh, alas, poor Yorick, I knew him, And so he painted a skull, but in order to know that it's a skull, you have to look at it from a certain perspective. So I think I have.
So weird. It looks like Photoshop after the fact.
And I know, and he painted it that way. Now, it's hard to do right here, but if you look at it, yeah, okay. I don't know if you can tell, look at directions from my hand, but if you look at it, if your eyes are up here and you look at it coming down this way, it looks like a skull. Pretty cool. So the artist forced you to actually practice one of the main ideas that he's trying to express in the painting. And I think that's really cool. Really cool. Just a few more. Yep, this is from the Bible. Yep. There's many Last Suppers. And here's the three graces once again. Raphael,